The philosopher Immanuel Kant gives us a very, very simple explanation to how we should live our lives. He has three basic moral principles. The first says, don't lie. The second says, don't cheat. And the third says, do not steal. I pose that the atrocities that are being committed by the state of Israel actively violate all of these three very, very simple rules in a moral and ethical code. That's why I think we need to condemn these behaviors. Before I present the next chapter, the one that I co-authored, I want to talk a little bit about me, just tell you who I am and why that helps, why that relates to Think for Action's messages. So, as you can read on the screen, I'm a high school senior. And so what I think is really cool about Think for Actions is the fact that they're willing to give kids like me, who are still in high school, who started this project when I was in grade 10, an opportunity to put my voice out there and be able to work in academic research. I think that's really cool. Great. On chapter 6 then. This chapter is on forced displacement and the crimes against humanity. There's three overviews that I want to provide of this chapter. Firstly, Zionists have been relocating Palestinian citizens using physical force, political pressure, and unnecessary violence for years. Second, these actions can be designated as a crime against humanity, dictated as apartheid, which is the implementation of a system of racial segregation in which one group is unfairly targeted. Historically, and this is the third one, apartheid has been used in conflicts such as in South Africa, where communities were unfairly dominated by the minority white population who implemented a system of social stratification as a way to forcibly dehumanize the non-white population. Firstly then, I did this? Excellent. Firstly then, on the beginning. I want to note vitally here that the comparison between South Africa and the Israel-Palestine conflict occurs when we examine in depth the treatment of Palestinians. Despite international attention, or the claim that we have international attention, there's been no consensus made on whether or not the treatment of Palestinians can be attributed to apartheid. I'm going to tell you that I think that this is because of Islamophobia. I tell you that when people are being unfairly and racially discriminated against, people are very, very quick to call it a crime against humanity, except when it's against people that they don't like. So after 9/11, and sentiments of the United States that were passed after that conflict, there was a lot of anti-Islamic hatred. I think that still contributes to the fact that the atrocities in Palestine aren't getting the international attention that they deserve. Recognizably then, I think the situation has caused ideology in Palestine to be changed as well. I think it fosters and perpetuates fear of the Zionists and the Palestinian citizens. I don't think that's a good thing either. Great. On the beginning then. Prior to the Nakba, British occupation of the land was basically how Palestine was run. So Britain gained control of the land above and containing the Gaza Strip shortly after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. After this was the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which is also known as the Asia Minor Agreement, which was the convention between France and Britain, basically splitting the Turkish-held lands of modern-day Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Israel, and Palestine. The ideological premise then behind the inclinations of Palestinians and why they want Palestinian land lies in its religious importance, which I know was already talked about previously, but the importance to the Muslim, Jewish, and the Christian people, with each group believing that they had a religion-bound right to the land. The second part of the beginning then is I think that we just continue to foster this additional conflict between these religious groups. I think that's very bad. So after the Sykes-Picot Agreement, Britain issued the Balfour Declaration, which is a public pledge by Britain during the First World War, stating the aim to establish a national home for Jewish people, and they attributed that home to being the current lands of Palestine. The Jewish population then in Palestine doubled between 1922 and 1931, going from 84,000 to 175,000 people in the lands of Palestine. This development in population was not accompanied by a growth in housing. Rather, we had Palestinian tenants displaced as land was sold to the new Jewish diaspora. During the same time frame then, I want to note the Muslim population in Palestine, which again was a growing economy at this point, so you'd hope that it would continue to grow, only grew by 12.2%, whilst the Jewish population grew by an astonishing 108.3%. This subtle displacement was the start of a long history of applied change for the citizens of Palestine. On the Arab Revolt then, preceding the death of the Sheikh Izad al-Qasim, who passed after a firefight with British forces, was the Arab Revolt. This is also referred to as the Palestinian Rebellion, and it served as an act of disobedience attempting to regain the land for the Palestinian people. The crackdown from the British then included outlawing major political parties, arresting notable figures, and exiling multiple community leaders in an attempt to scare Palestinian citizens into being quiet. Displacement in the modern day then. The case study that we use for the latter part of this chapter to prove the fact that there's still displacement in Palestine, even when these people are owning their homes and owning their land, they're still pushed out, was the idea of these Israeli settlers. So there was a family who owned their house in Palestine. They owned their house specifically in an area where there were a lot of Jewish settlers. And one day they came home and they found that a bunch of people had started living in their houses. And under squatter laws, unfortunately, because of the Israeli law, they were tried, and half of their house, the house that they owned, the house that they lived in, the house that they took residence in, was taken away and given to Israeli settlers without any actual justice for what these Palestinian citizens then lost. I'm telling you then that at the end of the conflict, even while this was tried in the civil court, we see that justice still wasn't served to people who actually deserved it. Sixthly then, on the settlers' imposition. Illegal settlements have been being built in Palestine and surrounding areas for years. And these settlements are viciously protected by Israeli police forces and soldiers. I'm going to tell you later on in this presentation why exactly the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are an incredibly biased system of protection. But we're telling you then that Palestinians were consistently forced into military checkpoints, even to this day, which limits the freedom of movement that they have within their own country.